The early morning sun peeked through the blinds as Diana Matthews stood in front of her bedroom mirror, her hands smoothing down the plain blue uniform she'd just put on. This wasn't the designer suits she usually wore. No, this was different. The fabric felt rough against her skin, the fit slightly awkward, but that was exactly the point. She took a deep breath, taking in her reflection. A successful black woman in her 40s, about to do something that would either make her a revolutionary leader or the laughingstock of the business world. The uniform's name tag read simply Diana, no last name, no titles, no hint of her MBA from Wharton or her 15 years climbing the corporate ladder. No indication that she'd just spent $50 million to buy Sterling Corporate Solutions, one of New York's most prestigious cleaning companies. Her fingers traced the embroidered company logo on her chest, remembering the marathon negotiation sessions that had led to this moment. Her phone buzzed again, probably another message from her board members. They'd been calling nonstop since she announced her plan to work undercover as a cleaner in her own company. The last board meeting had been particularly heated. "You're the CEO, not a janitor," they'd argued. "This is beneath you." Some had even questioned her mental state, suggesting the pressure of the acquisition had gotten to her. Diana walked to her kitchen, her practical work shoes squeaking slightly on the hardwood floors of her penthouse apartment. As she made her morning tea, a ritual she refused to give up, her grandmother's old china teacup caught her eye. It was chipped on one side, but Diana had never gotten rid of it. It reminded her of the woman who'd raised her, who'd cleaned other people's houses her entire life to put food on their table. "Baby girl," her grandmother used to say, warming her hands around this very teacup after long days of work. "People look at us and see what they want to see. But true wisdom, that comes from understanding both sides of the coin." Those words had stuck with Diana through business school, through every boardroom battle, through every victory and setback. She picked up her phone, scrolling through the dozens of unread messages. Her executive assistant had sent her the latest company reports. Profits were up, but employee turnover was at an all-time high. Complaints about working conditions were piling up, while customer satisfaction scores were dropping. The numbers told one story, but Diana knew there was more beneath the surface. Walking to her window, she looked out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there, hundreds of cleaners were already starting their day, wearing the same uniform she now wore. Many were working second or third jobs, supporting families, chasing dreams of their own. They were the invisible workforce that kept the city's gleaming offices running, yet they were treated as invisible themselves. Diana picked up her newly issued cleaning kit. She'd insisted on getting the exact same equipment as every other new hire. Inside was a detailed checklist of duties, safety protocols, and cleaning schedules. She'd spent the last 2 weeks training alongside other new employees, learning the proper way to clean windows, sanitize bathrooms, and dispose of waste. Her hands, more used to signing contracts than scrubbing floors, were already showing signs of the work. In her home office, she passed by her wall of achievements, her diplomas, awards, magazine features celebrating her as a rising star in corporate America. Today, none of that would matter. For the next 6 months, she would be just another cleaning lady in a sea of uniforms. The thought both terrified and excited her. She grabbed her work bag, not her usual leather briefcase, but a simple backpack containing her lunch, a water bottle, and a small notebook. In it, she'd already started jotting down observations from her training period. The outdated equipment, the rushed safety instructions, the way trainers spoke down to new employees, everything was fueled for the changes she planned to make. As Diana locked her apartment door, she remembered the last conversation she'd had with her grandmother before she passed away. "Baby," she'd said, holding Diana's hand tight, "whatever you do in life, remember that every person deserves to be seen, really seen." Standing in the hallway of her luxury building, Diana squared her shoulders. She wasn't just going undercover, she was going to see her company, really see it, through the eyes of those who kept it running. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt different today. The same security guard who usually greeted her with a respectful "Good morning, Ms. Matthews," barely glanced her way. She was no longer the successful executive everyone knew, she was just another cleaning lady heading to work. The transformation was already beginning, and she hadn't even left her building. Stepping out onto the busy Manhattan street, Diana joined the stream of early morning commuters. But instead of heading to her usual sleek office tower, she turned toward the employee entrance of Anderson and Pierce law firm, where she would start her first day as a cleaner. Her heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and determination. This wasn't just about understanding her business, it was about honoring her grandmother's legacy and changing the way corporate America treated its most essential workers. The gleaming marble floors of Anderson and Pierce law firm stretched out before Diana like a mirror, reflecting the early morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. It was 6 a.m., and she stood in the employee entrance, clutching her cleaning cart with both hands. The cart's wobbly wheel made a slight squeaking sound that seemed deafening in the quiet hallway. This wasn't her first time in this building. She'd been here countless times for business meetings, but it felt entirely different from this angle. Her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, a petite woman with kind eyes and calloused hands, had given her the morning's assignment, the 32nd floor, home to the firm's most prestigious partners. "Be extra careful up there," Mrs. Chen had warned, her voice carrying years of experience. "They notice everything, and they're not shy about complaining." The employee elevator ride was an education in itself. Inside, she found herself surrounded by other cleaning staff, each sharing tips in hushed voices. An older gentleman advised her about which partners left the biggest messes, while a young woman mentioned which bathrooms needed extra attention. Diana listened intently, realizing this informal network of information was something she'd never known existed in her company. As she pushed her cart down the carpeted hallways of the 32nd floor, the first early arriving lawyers barely glanced her way. One young associate nearly bumped into her while texting, then walked around her without a word of apology. Diana kept her head down, remembering Mrs. Chen's advice. The less they notice you, the better. The morning progressed with a rhythm she was still learning. Empty the trash bins before people arrive. Clean the fingerprints from the glass doors. Dust the desks, but don't move anything. Lawyers are particular about their papers. She found herself developing a strange appreciation for the work's methodical nature, even as her back began to ache from bending and stretching. Around 9 a.m., the office came fully alive. The sounds of clicking heels, opening doors, and coffee machines filled the air. Diana worked steadily, invisible to most but constantly aware of the conversations around her. 2 junior associates walked past, deep in discussion about their weekend plans at the Hamptons. They'd paused their chat only to point out a spot she'd missed on the window, though she'd cleaned it thoroughly just an hour before. The corner office belonged to Mr. Thompson, a senior partner known for his demanding nature. As Diana carefully cleaned his office, she overheard him on the phone, complaining about the incompetent cleaning service to someone. "I don't care what it costs," he barked into the phone. "We need better people. These ones can barely understand English." Diana's hand tightened on her cleaning cloth, but she kept working, noting how he spoke as if she weren't even in the room. During her lunch break, taken in a small, windowless room in the basement, Diana sat with her co-workers. They shared food and stories, speaking freely now that they were away from prying eyes. One woman worked 3 jobs to support her children through college. Another was taking night classes, dreaming of starting her own business someday. Their determination reminded Diana of her own journey, of the years spent pushing against barriers and prejudices. The afternoon brought new challenges. A coffee spill in the conference room needed immediate attention before a client meeting. Diana rushed to clean it, only to have a partner snap at her for making too much noise with her cleaning cart. She apologized softly, thinking of the irony. She'd once sat in similar conference rooms, making million-dollar deals, and now she was being scolded for the squeak of her cart's wheels. By 4 p.m., her feet were throbbing. The comfortable-looking leather chairs she'd cleaned all day seemed to mock her as she worked through her final tasks. A group of associates walked past, laughing about something on their phones. One of them pointed at their screen, saying, "Look at this cleaning lady who turned out to be a millionaire." Can you imagine? Like that would ever happen in real life. The irony almost made Diana laugh out loud. As she finished her shift, Diana noticed small details she'd never seen before, the way some lawyers deliberately made messes right after she'd cleaned, the dismissive glances, the casual cruelty of being treated as if you're invisible. But she also noticed moments of kindness: the partner who always said thank you, the secretary who offered her a bottle of water during a particularly busy moment, the security guard who held the door for her cart. In the locker room, changing out of her uniform, Diana's muscles protested every movement. Her hands were red and slightly raw despite the gloves she'd worn all day. As she gathered her things, she overheard two of her co-workers discussing a mandatory weekend shift that had just been announced. No one had asked if they had other commitments or family obligations. On her ride home, Diana pulled out her small notebook, her fingers still smelling of cleaning solutions despite thorough washing. She began writing frantically, documenting everything she'd seen and heard. The casual discrimination, the systemic disrespect, the physical demands of the job, but also the dignity and resilience of her co-workers, the quiet professionalism they maintained in the face of disrespect. Looking out the subway window, Diana thought about how this was just day one. She had months ahead of her, months of being invisible, of physical labor, of swallowing her pride. But she also knew that every moment was ammunition for the changes she would make. Every dismissive comment, every unreasonable demand, every story from her co-workers, all of it would help her transform sterling corporate solutions into something revolutionary. As she finally reached her apartment that evening, Diana kicked off her practical work shoes and sank into her couch, her body exhausted but her mind racing. She looked at her reflection in the dark window. She was still the same powerful CEO who had built a business empire, but now she saw something more. She saw her grandmother's strength, her co-workers' resilience, and the weight of responsibility she carried to make real, lasting change. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Mrs. Chen pushed her cleaning cart through the empty hallways of Smith & Reynolds law firm. It was her first week working the night shift, and already she could feel the weight of invisible judgment pressing down on her shoulders. The marble floors and mahogany walls seemed to mock the simple blue uniform she wore, such a far cry from the designer suits hanging in her closet at home. At exactly 8:30 p.m., just like clockwork, the young lawyers started trickling out of their offices, their designer shoes clicking against the freshly mopped floors. Mrs. Chen kept her head down, focusing on her work, just as she'd seen her other team members do. But she couldn't help noticing how these late working associates would walk right through wet floors, leaving muddy footprints in their wake, without so much as a glance in her direction. "Hey, the trash in conference room B needs emptying," called out one lawyer, not even bothering to look up from his phone. "No please, no thank you," just a command thrown into the air like she was somehow less than human. Mrs. Chen bit her tongue, remembering why she was here. Every interaction, every dismissive gesture was a lesson she needed to learn. The night took an interesting turn when she met her cleaning partner, Ms. Rose, a warm-hearted grandmother who'd been working here for 12 years. As they worked together cleaning the executive floor, Ms. Rose shared stories about her grandchildren, her voice full of pride as she talked about her grandson's college acceptance letter. "You know what keeps me going?" Ms. Rose whispered as they wiped down the conference room windows. "Knowing that my work matters, even if they don't see it. Without us, their fancy meetings wouldn't happen. Their important clients wouldn't be impressed. We're the invisible hands that keep their world spinning." Around midnight, they encountered a group of junior lawyers working late on a big case. The scene that unfolded made Mrs. Chen's blood boil. These young professionals had ordered pizza, and instead of using plates, they let grease drip all over the newly sanitized conference table. Crumbs scattered everywhere as they laughed about their weekend plans. "Oh look, the cleaning crew is here," one of them smirked, deliberately dropping a napkin on the floor while maintaining eye contact with Mrs. Chen. "Guess we're giving them job security, right?" Ms. Rose touched Mrs. Chen's arm gently, a silent reminder to stay calm. They'd seen this behavior before, people who thought a bigger paycheck meant a bigger right to disrespect others. The night grew more challenging when they reached the senior partner's offices. These spaces, with their expensive artwork and leather furniture, required extra attention. While cleaning one office, Mrs. Chen overheard two associates talking in the adjacent room, unaware of her presence. "Did you see the new cleaning lady? Bet she couldn't even afford to be a client here," one laughed. "Wonder if she even finished high school." What they didn't notice was Mrs. Chen's perfect posture as she cleaned, or how she carefully adjusted the expensive fountain pens on the desk to their original alignment. They couldn't see that behind her quiet exterior lay a mind sharp enough to buy and sell their careers 10 times over. The most revealing moment came when a young associate accidentally knocked over his coffee cup. Instead of helping clean up, he simply stepped over the mess, announcing, "Well, that's what we have cleaning staff for, right?" His colleagues laughed, but one junior associate looked uncomfortable, glancing apologetically in their direction. Throughout the shift, Mrs. Chen observed the different personalities that emerged after hours. There was Mr. Thompson, the security guard who always offered them fresh coffee from his thermos. The kind-hearted paralegal who stayed late but always made sure to clean up after herself and learned their names. These small gestures of humanity stood out like stars in an otherwise dark sky. As the night drew to a close, Mrs. Chen helped Ms. Rose with the heavy garbage bags. Together, they wheeled their carts to the service elevator, their shoes squeaking against the polished floors they'd spent hours cleaning. Ms. Rose shared her homemade cookies, a nightly tradition she maintained to keep spirits up when dignity's down. "You know what's funny?" Ms. Rose mused as they prepared to clock out. "These folks spend their days fighting for justice in those courtrooms, but they can't see the injustice walking around in their own offices." Mrs. Chen nodded, her mind already formulating changes that would need to be made. But for now, she was learning invaluable lessons about her company from the ground up. Every snide remark, every dismissive gesture, every moment of invisibility was building towards something bigger. As she drove home in the early morning hours, her expensive car safely parked blocks away from the office, Mrs. Chen reflected on the night's events. She thought about Ms. Rose's quiet strength, the security guard's simple kindness, and how the most expensive offices often house the poorest souls. Tomorrow would bring another night of insights, another chance to understand what needed to change. For now, she had work to do, real work that went far beyond just cleaning floors. The morning started like any other at Anderson and Pierce law firm, but there was tension in the air. Diana could feel it as soon as she walked through the employee entrance. Mrs. Chen was waiting by the time clock, her usually calm face creased with worry. "They're calling an emergency meeting," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something happened with the Richardson presentation room last night." Diana's heart sank. The Richardson room was where the firm held their most important client meetings. She'd cleaned it herself many times, knowing how crucial it was to keep it spotless. As she listened to Mrs. Chen explain, the story unfolded like a nightmare. The night before, one of the biggest potential clients was scheduled for an early morning meeting. The room had been locked when the evening cleaning crew arrived, with a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. They'd followed protocol. If a room was locked and marked, they didn't enter. But someone had used the room late at night, leaving coffee cups, scattered papers, and even food wrappers everywhere. Now, at 7 a.m., the managing partner was on the warpath. The potential clients had walked into a mess, and the firm was blaming the cleaning staff. Diana watched as Mrs. Chen gathered all the cleaners in the basement break room. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on everyone's worried faces. "They're threatening to cancel our entire contract," Mrs. Chen explained, her hands clutching her clipboard tightly. 5 years of service, and they want it ended over one room. Diana looked around at her co-workers, people who arrived hours before sunrise, who worked through holidays, who took pride in keeping these offices spotless. They didn't deserve this. Upstairs, Diana could hear the loud voices even through the thick office doors. The managing partner was holding court in the conference room, berating anyone who would listen about the incompetence of the cleaning staff. Through the glass walls, she could see him gesturing angrily, his face red with fury. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a message from her executive team. "Major crisis at A&P needs CEO intervention immediately." Diana's hands trembled slightly as she deleted the message. She was right here, witnessing everything, but she couldn't reveal herself. Not yet. The morning got worse. Human Resources called each member of the evening cleaning crew in for questioning. Diana watched as her co-workers emerged from these meetings, some in tears, others angry, all of them afraid for their jobs. Rita, who'd been on the evening shift, sat in the break room with her head in her hands. "I need this job," she whispered. "My kids." Diana was mopping the hallway when she overheard two associates talking around the corner. "I was here late last night," one said. That partner from the Chicago office was using the Richardson room for prep work. He must have ordered dinner in there. Did you tell HR? The other asked. Are you kidding? I'm not getting involved. Besides, it's just the cleaning staff. They'll find other jobs. Diana's grip on the mop handle tightened. She'd seen the security logs in her CEO email. They would show exactly who had accessed that room and when. But how could she explain having that information? The evidence that would clear her co-workers was right there in her phone, but using it would blow her cover. By lunchtime, the news had spread throughout the building. Other law firms in the building were watching, wondering if they should also review their cleaning contracts. Diana sat in the break room, watching her co-workers pick at their lunches, too worried to eat. Mrs. Chen was on the phone, trying to reach someone at corporate headquarters, someone who could help. If she only knew the CEO was sitting right there in a cleaner's uniform. The afternoon brought more tension. A memo went out to all staff about maintaining professional standards. Diana rated over a lawyer's shoulder as she emptied his trash bin. It was full of corporate doublespeak that basically blamed the cleaning staff for everything while taking no responsibility for the locked door or after-hours use. In the women's restroom, Diana overheard two paralegals discussing the situation. I heard they're going to fire the whole cleaning crew, one said. My friend in HR says they're already talking to other companies. That's awful, the other replied. Remember that nice older lady who used to clean our floor? She gave me a Christmas card last year. These people work so hard. Diana stood in the bathroom stall, her mind racing. She had built this company from the ground up, acquired others, made tough decisions. But this was different. These weren't just employees on a spreadsheet anymore. They were Mrs. Chen with her quiet strength, Rita with her children's college dreams, and dozens of others whose stories she now knew. As her shift ended, Diana watched the evening crew arrive, their faces tense with worry about their jobs. The managing partner walked past them without a glance, getting into his luxury car to drive home. Diana thought about her own car, sitting in a garage across town, unused these past months. Back in her apartment, Diana spread out all her notebooks on her dining room table. Every page contained evidence of the real story, the dedication of her staff, the impossible demands, the systemic disrespect. She picked up her phone, looking at the dozens of messages from her executive team begging for direction. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she would finally show them all who she really was. But tonight, she had work to do. She pulled out her laptop and began typing, preparing for what would become the most important presentation of her career. Because tomorrow, she wouldn't just be saving jobs, she would be changing the entire system. Long after her cleaning shift ended, Diana sat at her dining room table, surrounded by notebooks, sticky notes, and her laptop. The city lights twinkled outside her window as midnight approached. Her cleaning uniform hung on the back of a chair, a reminder of the double life she'd been living. She hadn't even changed out of her work shoes. Her mind was too focused on the task at hand. Taking a sip of her grandmother's favorite tea, she opened her laptop and began organizing her findings. The past 3 months hadn't just been about pushing a cleaning cart. They'd been about gathering evidence, understanding the real problems, and most importantly, finding solutions that would actually work. Okay, Grandma, she whispered to herself, a habit she'd developed during tough times. Help me make this right. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she typed, transforming her handwritten notes into a comprehensive plan. First came the pay structure. Diana pulled up the company's financial records, comparing them with her notes about her co-workers' struggles. Mrs. Chen worked 60-hour weeks but could barely afford her apartment. The young night shift worker was taking online classes but couldn't buy his textbooks. Diana started calculating. If she redistributed the executive bonus pool, eliminated redundant middle management positions, and optimized supply chains. Her phone buzzed with another message from her executive team. Board getting restless. Major shareholders asking questions. Diana ignored it. The board could wait. Right now, she was focused on the real heart of her company, the people who did the actual work. She moved on to equipment and supplies. Her hands still ached from wrestling with broken vacuum cleaners and trying to clean with watered-down solutions. Diana opened a spreadsheet and began researching costs for new equipment. Quality tools weren't cheap, but she'd learned firsthand how much time and effort they would save. Better equipment meant faster work, better results, and less physical strain on her workers. Around 2 a.m., she started working on the harassment reporting system. The current process was a joke. Complaints disappeared into HR's black hole, while problematic clients faced no consequences. Diana thought about Rita, about the young worker who quit after a lawyer wouldn't stop making comments about her uniform. She began drafting a new policy that would put worker safety first, including the right to refuse service to abusive clients without fear of retaliation. The training program was next. Diana had sat through the current version, 2 hours of outdated videos and confusing handouts. She started outlining a new approach: hands-on training, safety certifications that could lead to better positions, English classes for workers who wanted them, and most importantly, a clear path for advancement within the company. She pulled up the company's client contracts, reading them with new eyes. All those fancy legal terms about service standards and performance metrics, none of them mentioned treating workers with basic human dignity. Diana began drafting new contract language that would protect both her clients' interests and her workers' rights. As she worked, memories from the past 3 months flowed through her mind. The lawyer who deliberately spilled coffee to watch Rita clean it up. The executive who complained about those people being in his office. The cleaning crew's quiet professionalism in the face of daily disrespect. Each memory fueled her determination to create real change. Around 4 a.m., she started on the numbers. Diana hadn't built a successful business by ignoring profits. She pulled up financial projections, market analyses, competitor research. With precise calculations, she showed how investing in workers would actually save money in the long run. Lower turnover meant lower training costs. Better equipment meant more efficient work. Happier workers meant better service and more loyal clients. The sun was rising when she finally looked up from her work. Her back ached from hunching over the laptop, but her mind was clear. She had a plan, not just empty corporate promises, but a detailed roadmap for transformation. Better wages, proper equipment, real training, protection from harassment, and opportunities for advancement. Everything backed by solid numbers and practical implementation steps. She walked to her closet and pulled out her best business suit, the one she wore for major presentations. Tomorrow, she would need it. But first, she had one more task. Diana opened her email and began typing a message to the board of directors. It was time for an emergency meeting. Looking in the mirror, Diana saw both versions of herself, the powerful CEO and the humble cleaner. For the first time, these two identities didn't feel in conflict. They had merged into something stronger, something her grandmother would have been proud of. She wasn't just going to save her company, she was going to change an entire industry. Her phone buzzed again, her regular morning alarm. In a few hours, she would walk into Anderson & Pierce law firm one last time in her cleaning uniform. But today wouldn't end the way it started. Today, everything would change. Diana made one final cup of tea in her grandmother's old cup. The morning light caught the chip on its rim, reminding her of all the mornings her grandmother had left for work before sunrise. "You were right, Grandma," she said softly. "Sometimes you have to see both sides of the coin to know its true value." She gathered her presentation materials, her documentation, and most importantly, her courage. The past 3 months had taught her more than any business school ever could. She knew her plan would face resistance. Change always did. But she also knew she had something powerful on her side, the truth about what really happened in those gleaming office buildings after everyone else went home. As she prepared to leave, Diana took one last look at her dining room table, covered in the evidence of her double life. Every note, every observation, every late-night calculation, it was all leading to this moment. She wasn't just fighting for her company anymore. She was fighting for Mrs. Chen, for Rita, for every worker who deserved better. And this time, she wouldn't be invisible. The morning of Anderson & Pierce's annual corporate meeting dawned bright and clear. The same marble lobby that Diana had cleaned countless times over the past months now gleamed under her feet as she walked in, not through the service entrance this time, but through the main doors, her heels clicking confidently on the polished floor. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a perfectly tailored navy blue suit that probably cost more than what her cleaning colleagues made in 2 months. Her natural hair was styled professionally, and she carried her grandmother's old teacup in her briefcase, a reminder of why she was here. The security guard did a double take as she walked past. Just yesterday, he barely glanced at her in her cleaning uniform. Today, his eyes widened with recognition. "Miss Matthews," he stammered. I didn't know." Diana smiled warmly. "Good morning, Robert. Thanks for always being kind to everyone who comes through these doors." She'd noticed how he treated all workers with respect, regardless of their uniform. His shocked expression followed her to the elevator. The executive elevator rode smoothly up to the 50th floor, no wobbles like the service elevator she'd been using. Diana checked her presentation notes one last time. In her briefcase, alongside her laptop, sat 3 months' worth of documentation, photographs, and records, evidence that couldn't be ignored. The conference room was packed. Every partner, senior associate, and department head had been required to attend this emergency meeting about the cleaning service crisis. Diana stood in the back, watching them file in. She recognized every face: the partner who always left coffee rings on his desk, the associate who made messes just to watch them being cleaned up, the senior partner who never looked cleaners in the eye. The managing partner stood at the front, shuffling papers importantly. "As you all know, we're here to address the ongoing issues with our cleaning service. We have the CEO of Sterling Corporate Solutions joining us today to explain how they're going to fix this mess." Diana took a deep breath and walked to the podium. The room fell silent. She could see the confusion on their faces. Many of them had walked past her just yesterday. Some had even snapped orders at her. Now here she stood, transformed, powerful, unmistakably in charge. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I'm Diana Matthews, CEO of Sterling Corporate Solutions. For the past 3 months, I've been working as a member of the cleaning crew in this building." She paused, letting that sink in. "And we need to talk about what I've seen." The managing partner's face had gone from red to white. In the second row, a young associate who'd once told her to learn better English was sliding down in his seat. But Diana wasn't here for revenge. She was here for change. She clicked to her first slide, a photograph of the Richardson room incident. "Let's start with last week's crisis," she said. She pulled up security logs showing when the room had been locked and by whom. "The truth is, our cleaning crew followed exact protocols. The real issue isn't their performance, it's a system that treats them as invisible until something goes wrong." For the next hour, Diana laid out everything she'd learned. She showed photos of broken equipment they were expected to use, played recordings of inappropriate comments made to cleaning staff, displayed screenshots of impossible scheduling demands. But she also showed solutions. "We're not just a cleaning service," she explained, pulling up her new business model. "We're a human capital company, and starting today, we're revolutionizing this industry." She outlined her plans: living wages, proper equipment, real training programs, clear advancement paths, and strict policies against harassment. The room had grown very quiet. Some faces showed shame, others showed interest, and a few showed real understanding beginning to dawn. Diana clicked to her final slide, a photo of her cleaning crew, taken during a rare moment of laughter in the break room. "These are the people who keep your offices running," she said softly. "They're not invisible. They're not disposable. They're professionals who deserve respect. And if you want to continue working with Sterling Corporate Solutions, respecting them is non-negotiable." She pulled out her grandmother's teacup, now lending it power rather than hiding it. "My grandmother cleaned offices like these for 40 years. She taught me that true leadership means understanding every level of your business. So yes, I spent 3 months cleaning your offices. And now I'm going to spend every day making sure the people who do this crucial work are treated with the dignity they deserve." The managing partner started to speak, probably about contract terms or legal implications. But Diana held up her hand. "Your current contract with us expires next week," she said. "I have a new one here." She pulled out a thick document. "It includes everything I've outlined today. If you want to continue with us, these changes are mandatory. If not, we'll happily help you transition to another service." She looked around the room, meeting eyes that had looked through her just days ago. "But before you decide, remember this: I'm not the only CEO who started from the ground up. I'm not the only success story wearing a uniform. Think carefully about how you treat people, because you never know who they might be or who they might become." The room burst into chaos as she finished. Questions flew from every direction. The managing partner was frantically whispering with other partners. But Diana noticed something else. The young associates in the back were nodding. The office managers were studying her new policies with real interest. And through the conference room's glass walls, she could see her cleaning crew gathering, having heard the news. Mrs. Chen stood at the front of the group, tears in her eyes but head held high. Rita was there too, clutching her phone, probably already texting her kids about what was happening. They weren't invisible anymore. They were finally being seen. Diana gathered her materials, including her grandmother's teacup. She had more meetings to attend, more companies to confront, an entire industry to change. But for now, she just smiled at her crew and nodded. They weren't just employees anymore. They were her partners in revolution. 1 year had passed since Diana's revelation at Anderson and Pierce, and the changes were everywhere. Standing in the lobby of Sterling Corporate Solutions' new headquarters, she watched the morning shift arrive. Gone were the worn-out uniforms and tired expressions. Instead, her employees walked in wearing crisp, professional uniforms with the company logo, carrying modern equipment and tablets for logging their work. The lobby itself told the story of transformation. One wall displayed photographs of cleaning crew members who had been promoted to management positions. Another showed newspaper articles about the company's revolutionary changes in the industry. But Diana's favorite was the simple framed photo of her grandmother smiling in her own cleaning uniform from years ago. Her morning meeting was about to start, but first she stopped by the training center, a space that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Through the glass walls, she could see Mrs. Chen teaching a certification class. The older woman had become one of their most valued trainers, sharing decades of experience with new employees. Today's lesson was about sustainable cleaning practices, part of their new environmental initiative. "Good morning, Ms. Matthews," called out a familiar voice. It was Rita, now the head of their employee wellness program. She'd finished her business degree with the help of the company's education support system. "The new healthcare benefits are making a real difference. We've had a 90% enrollment rate." Diana smiled, remembering the break room conversations about medical bills and missed doctor's appointments. Now, every full-time employee had comprehensive health coverage. Even part-time workers received basic benefits, something unheard of in the industry. In her office, Diana picked up the morning's report. Employee turnover had dropped by 70%. Client satisfaction scores were at an all-time high. The training program had certified over 300 workers in specialized cleaning techniques, and 50 employees had moved into management positions. Her phone buzzed with a message from Anderson and Pierce. After initial resistance, they'd become one of their strongest supporters. Their managing partner had even spoken at industry conferences about the benefits of treating cleaning staff with respect. The message was simple. "Our new associate orientation went great. Your team's presentation on office etiquette really opened some eyes." Diana opened her laptop to review the day's schedule. Her inbox was full of inquiries from other companies wanting to learn about their model. Some were competitors, others were clients, but all of them had noticed the change. Sterling's employees weren't just cleaning buildings anymore, they were building careers. The Morning Sun caught the edge of her old cleaning uniform, now framed on her office wall, beside her CEO certificate. She'd kept it as a reminder, but also as a symbol. Every new employee saw it during their orientation, heard the story behind it, understood what it meant about the company's values. Down in the break room, now a comfortable space with decent furniture and working appliances, the morning crew was having breakfast. The company provided healthy meals for all shifts now. Diana watched through the doorway as they chatted and laughed, sharing stories about their families, their studies, their dreams. A young woman was showing off her acceptance letter to community college. She'd be starting classes next semester while continuing to work. The company's flexible scheduling and tuition assistance program made it possible. Another worker was explaining a new cleaning technique he developed, which would now be evaluated by the innovation team. The quarterly management meeting was about to start in the main conference room. Diana gathered her materials, including her grandmother's old teacup, now a beloved part of every important meeting. As she walked in, she saw faces that would have been unimaginable in these roles a year ago. Former cleaners who now ran departments, managed client relationships, and developed training programs. Let's start with our community impact report, Diana began. The presentation showed the ripple effects of their changes. Employees' children attending college, families moving into better neighborhoods, workers starting their own small businesses with company support. The numbers were impressive, but the real story was in the lives changed. After the meeting, Diana had a video call with a major business magazine. They were featuring Sterling as an example of corporate transformation done right. The reporter asked about profits, expecting bad news. Instead, Diana showed how investing in workers had actually improved the bottom line. Lower turnover meant lower costs. Better training meant fewer mistakes. Happier workers meant better service. Late afternoon brought a special ceremony in the lobby. They were unveiling a new wall of honor, recognizing long-term employees. Many had started as cleaners and now held key positions. Each plaque told a story of growth, of opportunity seized, of dignity restored. As Diana prepared to give her speech, she looked out at the gathered crowd. There were tears in many eyes, but they were tears of pride. These weren't invisible workers anymore. They were professionals, experts, leaders. She touched her grandmother's teacup, which she brought down for the occasion. "A year ago," she began, "we set out to prove something. That treating workers with respect isn't just the right thing to do, it's good business. That every person deserves the chance to grow, to learn, to lead. That the person cleaning your office today could be running the company tomorrow." She gestured to the wall of photos, to the proud faces before her. "Look how far we've come, but this is just the beginning. Every day, we're showing the world that success doesn't have to come at the cost of dignity. That profit and respect can go hand in hand. That when you invest in people, amazing things happen." As the applause faded, Diana watched her employees mingling with clients, investors, and reporters. The lines that once separated them had blurred. In their place was something new. A model of business that put people first, that proved dignity and success could go hand in hand. Back in her office that evening, Diana added a final note to her grandmother's old teacup, which now sat in a special display case. "You taught me to see both sides," she wrote. "Now we're teaching the world." The cup was chipped, worn, but beautiful, just like the truth it had helped reveal, that every person, regardless of their job, deserves respect, opportunity, and the chance to show who they really are.